Good morning, Dr. Dalia Yunis, and good morning, everyone. We are Group 4, Mohammed Dabous, and Tarek Zaki. Our topic today is critical choke points in global trade. I want to start with a number. Around 80% of everything you own, the phone in your pocket, the clothes on your back, the fuel in your car, at some point traveled across an ocean, and that ocean traffic is funneled through just 6 narrow waterways. As we sit here today, 3 of those 6 are at war. This This presentation is about how a topic that sounds purely geopolitical, geopolitical straits on a map, is actually the single biggest supply chain risk that companies face in 2026. Let's begin. Here's our journey for the next 25 minutes. Why sea matters, the 6 choke points, what cargo flows through them, the 2026 war map, alternative routes, economic impact, and the MBA lesson, here what we do about it. Q and A at the end. Let's dive in. Look at this chart. Sea transportation carries 80% of global trade by volume. Road transport handles 15%. Rail manages 4%. Air cargo accounts for just 1%. This overwhelming reliance on maritime shipping is what makes global supply chains critically vulnerable to disruptions at strategic choke points. But here's a nuance that matters. When you measure by value instead of volume, the picture flips. Sea is around 50% of value. Air rises to around 20%, even though it carries less than 1% by weight. Why? Air specializes in high-value, time-sensitive goods, smartphones, pharmaceuticals, semiconductors. For today's topic, we're focused on the 80% by volume. That's where the physical economy actually happens. Why does sea dominate? 3 reasons. Cost. Sea freight is roughly 12 to 16 times cheaper than air per ton per the World Bank. For grain, ore, oil, sea isn't the best option. It's the only viable option. Scale. The Maersk. Irina, launched in 2023, carries 24,000 TEU. One vessel equals thousands of trucks. Energy. Roughly 96% of internationally traded crude oil moves by sea. Pipelines can't cross oceans. Saudi crude to Japan? Tankers. Here's where the story turns. 80% of trade moves by sea, but that trade is not spread evenly. It's funneled through a handful of narrow passages we call choke points. A choke point has 4 characteristics: huge volumes forced through, no practical alternatives, single actor disruption possible, enormous geopolitical leverage. Think of it 3 ways. A 4-lane highway, 25% of world trade can be blocked by 1 tanker, 1 drone, 1 mine. Remember the Ever Given in 2021? 6 days, $9 billion in damage. A pressure point, close one, prices spike globally within hours. And the heart of this presentation, a weapon. In 2026, 3 of 6 choke points are being actively used as instruments of war. Let's meet them. 6 choke points, know each one by name. Malacca, between Malaysia, Indonesia, Singapore, the busiest. 23 million barrels per day, over 100,000 transits in 2025. Hormuz, between Iran and Oman, the most critical for energy. 20.9 million barrels per day. Suez, 12% of global seaborne trade by value. The Asia-Europe Container Highway, Bab el-Mandeb, between Yemen and the Horn of Africa. That 4.2 figure is post-crisis. Pre-crisis in 2023 was 9.3. The Bosphorus with the Dardanelles, smaller in oil but 20% of global wheat exports. Panama, 5% of global volume but 40% of U.S. container traffic. 6 waterways. Disruption in anyone sends shockwaves through the global economy within days. The Strait of Malacca, $3.4 trillion passes through here every year, larger than Germany's GDP. A 900-kilometer channel between Malaysia and Sumatra. At its narrowest, the Phillips Channel near Singapore, just 2.8 kilometers wide, 1.5 nautical miles, bi-directional flow. Going east, Middle East crude, Qatari LNG, iron ore, coal. Going west, electronics, machinery, consumer goods. Now, look at the dependencies. Japan gets 80% of its oil through here. Korea, 70%. China, about 48% of crude. Beijing has a name for this concentration. The Malacca Dilemma. The fear that the U.S. Navy could sever China's energy lifeline overnight. It's the reason China built pipelines through Myanmar, ports in Pakistan, the entire Belt and Road Initiative. Status today? Stable. But if Malacca ever closes, no choke point disruption in history compares. The Strait of Hormuz. If Malacca is the busiest, Hormuz is the most dangerous. In peacetime, 20.9 million barrels per day, 34% of global crude trade, per IEA, 167 kilometers long, narrowing to 39 kilometers, 21 nautical miles at its tightest. Iran sits on the northern shore. They could close this strait with mines, missiles, or fast attack boats. Why is Hormuz unique? It is the only maritime outlet for 5 of the world's top 10 oil producers: Saudi Arabia, Iraq, the UAE, Kuwait, and Iran itself. What flows through? Crude, refined products. 93% of Qatar's LNG and 96% of the UAE's LNG, petrochemicals, fertilizers, over 33 million containers a year through Gulf ports. The fertilizer angle is critical. Gulf fertilizer feeds agriculture worldwide. Close Hormuz, and you raise the cost of growing food everywhere. Status: active war. As of March 4th, 2026, Iran closed this strait following Operation Epic Fury. Traffic is running at 5% of normal. We'll come back to this conflict. The Suez Canal. Technically a canal, not a strait, but for those of us in Egypt, this one hits close to home. 193 kilometers through northeastern Egypt, linking the Red Sea and the Mediterranean. Saves 7 to 9,000 kilometers versus going around Africa. What flows through? Suez is the container highway between Asia and Europe. Before the crisis, around 30% of all global container traffic moved through here. Also crude, LNG, grain, chemicals, automotive. The numbers: over $1 trillion of cargo per year pre-crisis. Transits at 13,213 in 2024, down 50%. Because you can't safely reach Suez from the south, as we'll see on the next slide. Egyptian stakes. The canal set a record $10.25 billion in revenue in 2023, Egypt's third largest source of foreign currency. In 2024, that collapsed to $3.99 billion, a 61% collapse per the Central Bank of Egypt. That's pressuring the Egyptian pound. Complicating the IMF program. This is how a choke point crisis on the other side of the Red Sea reaches our economy here in Cairo. Status: spillover crisis. Suez itself isn't attacked, but functionally closed. Bab el-Mandeb, in Arabic, the Gate of Tears, a 50-kilometer channel between Yemen and the Horn of Africa, the southern gateway to the Red Sea and therefore to Suez. This is the slide that explains why Suez collapsed. Look at that number: 9.3 million barrels per day pre-crisis in 2023. Today, 4.2, less than half. The crisis. Since November 2023, the Iran-backed Houthi movement has been attacking commercial vessels, drones, anti-ship missiles, hijackings. Maersk, MSC, CMA, CGM, and HAH Paag Lloyd all suspended Red Sea routes and rerouted around the Cape of Good Hope. That adds 10 to 14 days to every Asia-Europe voyage. $933,000 in fuel per AFFRA max tanker voyage. 1 to 2 million for a large container ship. Red Sea traffic dropped 60%. 47% more oil is now going around Africa. Status: active attacks, brief ceasefire in 2025, then on February 28th, in solidarity with Iran during Operation Epic Fury, the Houthis resumed. The Panama Canal. This one is different from the others, and here's why. 80 kilometers of artificial waterway connecting the Atlantic to the Pacific. 2 parallel lock systems. Original 1914 Panamax and the Neo-Panamax expansion that opened in 2016. Critical detail: Panama uses fresh water. The locks operate by draining fresh water from Gatun Lake. That's the climate vulnerability. About 5% of global maritime trade volume, smaller than Suez, but it carries 40% of all U.S. container traffic. Primary lane, Asia to U.S. East Coast. Unlike Suez, Panama does not carry significant crude oil. Its energy role is U.S. LPG and LNG going to Asia. Key. The 2023 to 2024 drought. Panama's driest October in 70 years. Gatun Lake fell to 79.6 feet, lowest since 1965. Daily transits cut from 36 to 22, Then 18, roughly a 50% cut. Auction slot prices exploded. Japan's ANEAOs paid a record $3.975 million for one LPG transit slot in November 2023. Status: recovered but contested. Fiscal year 2025 broke all records, but politically, President Trump openly threatened to take it back. The C.K. Hutchison port sale to BlackRock and MSC is being blocked by Beijing. The contrast with Suez is sharp. Suez is a geopolitical choke point. Panama is a climate choke point. The Turkish Straits, Bosphorus, and Dardanelles. By oil volume, the smallest of our choke points, 3.7 million barrels per day. But it punches far above its weight for one reason: bread. Two narrow waterways linking the Black Sea to the Mediterranean. The Bosphorus narrows to 700 meters and runs through the middle of Istanbul, a city of 16 million. This is the only sea exit for Russia, Ukraine, Romania, Bulgaria, and Georgia. Russian and Ukrainian wheat, the world's breadbasket. Russian fertilizers. Russian crude from Novorossiysk. Around 20% of global wheat exports pass through here. When Russia blockaded Ukrainian ports in 2022, global wheat prices spiked 60%. When the UN brokered grain deal took effect, the FAO food price index fell 20 to 23% from peak. The 1936 Montreux Convention gives Turkey legal control over warship passage in wartime. They invoked it in February 2022 and have used it to block both Russian reinforcements and NATO warships. Playing both sides. Status: adjacent conflict, straits open. Black Sea behind them is a war zone. Look at this chart carefully. It shows what's actually flowing through each of our 6 choke points, and the picture is dramatically different for each one. Hormuz is almost pure energy, 90% oil and gas, an energy corridor. Suez is opposite, only 25% oil, 50% containers. A consumer goods highway, Asian factories to European shoppers. Malacca is balanced, heavy oil eastbound, heavy containers westbound. Turkish Straits, about half oil by tonnage, but it's a 30% grain share that gives this choke point global geopolitical weight. Panama is unique, half containers, then LPG, LNG, dry bulk, no crude. One honest note: these percentages are illustrative. No authoritative publication breaks down choke point cargo by exact percentage. The shape of the differences is what matters, and that leads to the strategic insight: same disruption, different victims. Concrete examples now: a Hormuz disruption hits energy buyers. Refineries in Japan, Korea, India, China. Airlines worldwide. Chemical companies. Malacca hits Asian manufacturers. Toyota, Samsung, TSMC. The Made in Asia model depends on Malacca. Hit Bab el Mandeb, and Suez hit European retailers. IKEA, Zara, H&M, Amazon EU. Add 14 days to every shipment and inventory costs go up while sales go down. Turkish Straits hits food importing nations. Egypt, the world's largest wheat importer. Tunisia, Lebanon, Bangladesh, Indonesia, Sub-Saharan Africa, where bread price spikes don't just hurt margins, they trigger political instability. Panama hits U.S. East Coast importers. Walmart, Home Depot, plus Asian LPG buyers. The MBA takeaway: choke point risk is product specific. The same physical event hits completely different P&Ls. Map your supply chain by choke point exposure, not just country of origin. This is the most important slide of the presentation. Read it carefully. Hormuz, active war, United States plus Israel versus Iran. Operation Epic Fury, Week 10, Bab el Mandeb, active attacks, HEU, these, versus the Western Coalition. Resumed February 28th. Turkish Straits. Straits open, but the Black Sea behind them is an active war zone. Year 4 of Russia-Ukraine. Suez, not directly attacked but functionally declined. Malacca, stable today, but the Taiwan scenario remains the single largest tail risk. Panama, the drought is over. The political crisis is not. Step back. 3 of 6 major choke points simultaneously disrupted by armed conflict. According to the IEA, this is the largest oil supply disruption in the history of the global oil market. We're living through it. Operation Epic Fury, February 28th, 2026, U.S. and Israeli airstrikes on Iran killed Supreme Leader Khamenei. Iran retaliated with missile barrages on Israel and U.S. bases in the Gulf. Then on March 4th, Iran closed Hormuz and began mining it. The combatants, U.S., Israel, Iran primary. Hezbollah and HEU activated as second fronts. U.S. imposed a counter blockade on Iranian ports April 13th. Diplomatic positioning. China and Russia vetoed the UN resolution April 7th. China protects Iran because it's the largest buyer of Iranian oil. Quick diplomacy is impossible. Yasunkiro. Who pays the price? Asian energy importers, Japan, Korea, India, China, fuel shortages, rationing. Gulf producers themselves, Saudi Arabia, UAE, Kuwait, Qatar, Bahrain, Iraq, forced output cuts. 20,000 mariners and 2,000 ships physically stranded in the Persian Gulf right now. Gulf fertilizer exports halted, pushing up food costs worldwide. JEH Bell Ali transshipment paralyzed. This is happening right now. As we sit in this room, second active conflict, different combatants, different victims. The Houthi campaign, originally launched November 2023 over Gaza, brief ceasefire in 2025, February 28, 2026, they resumed in solidarity with Iran on one side, the Houthis on the other, U.S. Navy Operation Prosperity Guardian plus UK and French escorts. Who pays the price? Egypt is critical. Suez Canal revenue went from a record $10.25 billion in 2023 to $3.99 billion in 2024. A 61% collapse, a major fiscal crisis playing out right now. European retailers, Asia-Europe traffic forced around the Cape, adding 14 days and $1 to $2 million per voyage. East African food security threatened. Maersk, MSC, CMACGM, and HALPAIG Lloyd have all suspended Red Sea routes. Mediterranean ports, Piraeus, Genoa, Barcelona, container traffic collapsed. Two more cases. Turkish Straits. Straits open, Black Sea behind them closed. Russian tankers from Novorossiysk now take routes 70% longer. Turkey invoked Montreux in February 2022. They control warship transit and have restricted both sides. They brokered the 2022 Black Sea Grain Initiative. Who pays? Food importers, Egypt, Tunisia, Lebanon, Bangladesh, Indonesia, Sub-Saharan Africa. The Malacca Time Bomb. 3 scenarios. A. China-Taiwan War. U.S. Navy blockades Malacca. The Malacca Dilemma realized. B. Piracy escalation. 108 incidents in 2025, up 74%, highest since 2007. Per recap ISC. Mostly low severity, but trend matters. C. India-China naval confrontation. India's Andaman and Nicobar Command sits at Malacca's western mouth. If Malacca closes, no choke point disruption in history compares. Can't ships go a different way? Short answer, yes, but not enough. Hormuz, Saudi Petroline, plus UAEADCOP. Nameplate 7 to 8.8 million barrels per day. Realistic 4 to 5 due to terminal constraints. Normal Hormuz flow is 20. That's a 75% shortfall. Iran is also targeting these pipelines. Malacca, Sunda, and Lombok Straits add 2 to 3 days. Manageable. China-Myanmar pipeline only 0.4 million barrels per day. Bab el-Mandeb and Suez, Cape of Good Hope, adds 10 to 14 days, up to $2 million per voyage. And every ship around Africa is a ship that doesn't pay Suez fees. Egypt loses twice. Turkish Straits. You can move Russian oil through BTC pipeline at 50% utilization, but you cannot move grain through a pipeline. Wheat must move by ship. Panama. No real alternative. Cape Horn or Suez routing adds 15 days and 8,000 miles. The hard math. Kuwait, Qatar, Bahrain, Iraq, Iran have no meaningful pipeline alternative. They sit on the Persian Gulf. Sea is their only export route. The map is not redundant. Let's quantify what this is doing to the global economy. Look at the curve. Pre-war Brent at $78. March 2026, after the strikes and Hormuz closure, it spiked to 126, a 60% jump in 3 weeks, moderated to 115 in April after the IEA released 400 million barrels, the largest coordinated release in IEA history, bigger than all previous combined. May of 2026, 110. Forecast if this drags on, 140 cubic per the IEA. This is the largest oil supply disruption in history. Bigger than 1973, bigger than 1979, bigger than 1990. The inflation chain on the right, oil up, transport costs up, fertilizer up. Fertilizer is made from natural gas. Food prices up, CPI up. Central banks keep rates high. Strong dollar weakens emerging market currencies. Egypt, Pakistan, Bangladesh, Sri Lanka, every import-dependent economy faces debt crisis risk. This is how a regional war becomes a global macroeconomic event. The macro picture. 4 key numbers. Global trade growth was 2.4% in 2025. For 2026, 1.5 to 2.5. We've cut expected growth in half. Global GDP growth 2.6% versus the pre-war 2.9. Dallas Fed estimates annualized Q2 GDP impact at minus 2.9 percentage points, and 3.4 billion people live in countries already spending more on debt service than on health or education, per UNCTAD. The vulnerability table tells you who bears the burden. Extreme: South Asia, India, Pakistan, Bangladesh. High: East Asia, Japan, and Korea, because 70 to 80% of their oil comes through Hormuz or Malacca. Europe: LNG dependency since Russian gas was cut. Egypt and Red Sea littoral. Sub-Saharan Africa: moderate U.S. East Coast importers, Panama exposure. The U.S. overall net energy exporter, but inflation still hits. China: strategic reserves, pipeline alternatives. And the uncomfortable insight: Russia is a beneficiary. Higher oil prices fund the war economy. This is the most important slide for us as future supply chain managers. 5 responses every supply chain organization is implementing right now. 1. Geographic diversification. China plus 1 becomes China plus many. Vietnam, India, Mexico, Indonesia spread sourcing across multiple choke point corridors. 2. Nearshoring and friendshoring. Move production closer to your end market. U.S. companies reshoring to Mexico, Walmart, Tesla, Apple. European companies moving to Turkey, Morocco. Shorter routes mean fewer choke points. 3. The big one. The death of just-in-time. JIT was the gospel of operations for 30 years. That model is dead. Companies now hold 60 to 90 days of inventory versus the pre-2020 norm of 30. Expensive, but it's insurance against disruption. 4. Multimodal route planning. China-Europe Railway moves containers in 18 days versus 35 by sea. The middle corridor. Pipeline alternatives. Air freight as emergency option. Redundancy beats efficiency. 5. Financial hedging programs. Oil futures. Bunker fuel adjustment clauses. War risk insurance. Currency hedging. Once optional, now table stakes. The through line. Every one of these trades efficiency for resilience. We're undoing 30 years of supply chain optimization in 36 months. Before we open it up, 3 takeaways. If you remember nothing else, remember these. 1. Concentration risk is the defining feature of modern logistics. Around 80% of world trade depends on 6 narrow waterways. There is no diversification at the global level, only at the firm level. We cannot redesign geography. 2. This is the live operating environment, not a hypothetical. 3 of 6 choke points simultaneously disrupted right now in 2026. The IEA calls it the largest oil supply disruption in history. We're living through it. 3. Resilience beats efficiency. The frameworks that prize lean, JIT, single source procurement are being rewritten in real time. Companies that survive will treat geopolitics not as an external shock, but as a core supply chain discipline. Globalization was built on a hidden assumption that the world's narrowest waterways would always be open. The 2026 crisis has shattered that assumption. The question is no longer, how do we optimize for cost? It is, how do we design for resilience when the map itself becomes a weapon? Thank you for your time. Dr. Dahlia, colleagues, Tarek and I welcome your questions.